गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। गुरवे सर्वलोकानां विषजे भवरोगिणः निधये सर्वविद्यानां दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। ॐ नमः प्रणवार्थाय शुद्धज्ञानैकमूर्तये निर्मलाय प्रशान्ताय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। न हि ज्ञानेन सदृशं पवित्रम् इह विद्यते तत्स्वयं योगसंसिद्धिं कालेनात्मानि विन्दति। So what transforms you in life is knowledge. What makes you receptive to knowledge is your practices. Knowledge is everywhere. This whole space is filled with knowledge. Every atom in this space is filled with knowledge. Just like every DNA in your every cell is filled with you, your blueprint is there. Similarly, everything in this space is filled with knowledge. What you need is the capacity to receive it, to appreciate and download it. That can only happen when you fine tune yourself. That facility is there within you, but it is clouded by stress, by distractions, by lack of prana. So when you are able to attend to those, then the knowledge becomes easily accessible. So what Krishna says is nahi jnanena sadrusham pavitram iha vidyate. There is nothing as pure as knowledge, and this knowledge is not somewhere outside, it is there in you. When you get established in yoga, yoga samsiddhim kalena atmani, at that point in time it comes out of you. So knowledge is not information, knowledge is concrete of your experiences. When what is becomes your experience, then you have attained knowledge. Usually you don't see the world as it is, you see as you want it to see, or the way you understand it. But truth is the way it is. So when will you get the ability to perceive truth the way as it is? When you become established in yoga. And what is yoga? Yoga is having a sense of harmony, lack of conflict. We always live in conflict. You know what is the source of conflict in life? What is the source of conflict? Mind, okay. Difference of opinion. Yes. The moment you say no, conflict begins. Yes? When you say no, conflict begins. The moment you say yes, there is no conflict in life. Have you noticed this? Why do we say no? Because your world is like this, and if the world is not like that, if somebody else's world is like something else, you say no. Yes? You should not be like this, you should not say this, you should not be doing this, this should not be like this, he should not be doing this, she should not be doing this, the government should not be doing this. All that is saying no to life. When you say no, there is no harmony in life. When you say yes, then there is harmony. This saying yes to life is yoga. Yoga is what? Yoga is experiencing harmony with life. In life, there are situations which are pleasant, which are unpleasant. Irrespective of whether it is convenient to you or not convenient to you, if you say this is how life is, it is okay, then you are in harmony. And when you are able to accept life the way it has presented to you, then you are in yoga. And then you create a platform for knowledge to come out of you. Are you getting what I am saying? And the whole spiritual practices which we do, I know most of you do some practices, even those who don't do, it's very important to get established in practices. What do the practices do? The practices clear away the stress and unwanted burdens in you, and then they bring harmony. So when you do your kriya, when you do your meditation, at some point you will feel that lightness in your system. At some point you feel that it is okay. Yes or no? Yeah. So that is the harmony. So and that's what Krishna is saying, that tat swayam yoga samsiddhim kale natmani vindati. At that point in time when you are established in yoga, this knowledge is available to you. Knowledge is the same, but as you get deeper within yourself, different levels of it open up to you. Say for, we'll take an example. So in the Indian mythology or the Hindu mythology, there is Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. All of you are aware of this? Most of you are aware of this? Yeah. So Brahma represents creation. So Vishnu represents maintenance, and Shiva represents destruction. Okay, this is the rough understanding. So when our ancient rishis were very enlightened, very intelligent, they gave these things, they also hid a deeper meaning into all these things. It is lot more than what it is. And the way it was depicted, how is Brahma depicted, have you seen? When you say Brahma, what do you remember, what comes to your mind? 3 heads or 4 heads? Okay. Yeah. And these 3 heads or 4 heads, the eyes are all open. They are looking in all directions. Yeah. Where do you perceive the world from? You perceive the world from your senses. How do you understand the world? From what you see, what you listen, what you taste, that is what your world. So our perception of the world is through the senses, and our attachment to the world is also through the senses, isn't it? What is it that binds you to the world? Because you want pleasure from the world. Where do you get pleasure from? You get pleasure from the senses. For most of humanity, what is joy? Something nice to eat, something nice to see, something nice to touch, something nice to taste and smell. That is all joy is. Yes? So if you got 4 heads means what? You want everything from every side. You are that much more attached to the world. So Brahma represents the attachment to the world. You know, you are more attached to what you create in life. Your children, your job, your career, your identity is all your creation. What you create, you are attached to that deeply, and that is what binds you to this world. So Brahma represents the bondage of the world. You create and you get stuck with it, and you cannot escape from it. Are you getting this? And look at the other end, look at the Shiva. How is Shiva depicted? Yeah, meditation, almost eyes closed. It is completely to the opposite side. The way the Brahma is depicted is completely opposite to Shiva. Shiva is eyes closed almost. When do you close your eyes? When you are contented. When you got nothing to get from outside, you say, all I want is with me. Then you close your eyes. Have you noticed whenever you have a peak experience, automatically you close your senses? Have you noticed? See, sometimes you eat something really tasty. What do you say? Ah, it's so nice. You smell something nice. Automatically you close your eyes. You close your eyes when you are contented in life. when you don't want to grab anything from the world. When there is no greed, there is contentment, and when there is contentment, you withdraw from your senses, you withdraw from the world, and Shiva represents that ultimate state of contentment. So, Brahma is where we are, Shiva is where we want to be. Everybody is behind contentment in life, but everybody doesn't want to come out of the world. So, how do you stay attached but still want contentment? See, Shiva, the way, if you look at the way the whole story they have given is so beautiful. He is so dispassionate, is content, doesn't even want a house. He lives in a burial ground, doesn't have clothes to wear, doesn't have a bank account, no jewelry, nothing. So contented. So all I have is good enough, that state. And look at Brahma state of people. In spite of having so much, we are greedy. Oh, more, more, more. So on one stage is attachment, on the other side is dispassion and contentment. And the path between the two is Vishnu. Vishnu is the one who takes you from there to there. And all technology is Vishnu. And yoga is that technology which takes you from Brahma to Vishnu, which takes you from the world of greed to the state of contentment is Vishnu. That is why Vishnu is called the skillful one. Krishna is the most skilled person you will see in history. Like Shiva, Krishna is not detached from the world. He does not live in a burial ground. He lives in palaces. He wears nice clothes. He is royal. He lives in the world like every one of us, but he is not attached to the world. Krishna is a complete personality. There is no personality in the world, in history, like Krishna, because there is nothing which Krishna has not done, good or bad, isn't it? Everybody has some. Say, if you think of Buddha, you will never see Buddha singing, dancing. Buddha is sitting serene. But Krishna you can see singing and dancing. Krishna is sitting serene as well. He lies as well. He gives the highest wisdom as well. He has run from a battlefield like a coward, and he has fought wars as well. Yeah? There is nothing in the world untouched by Krishna. Anything anybody can do, and he has done it. And that is why the wisdom which comes from somebody who has explored all aspects of life is a very authentic wisdom. This is not a wisdom from books, it is a wisdom from experience. Oh, this is what it is, I have done that, this is what you have to do. You see, if you buy a new phone, you have two options to find out how it works. One option is they will give you a manual, you have to go through the manual and find out. Second one is, if your friend has got the same phone, you can ask him how to use the phone, which is easy. Easy. So getting wisdom from somebody who has lived the life and gone through the experiences is like that. Oh, this is all it is. Oh, you press that button is here. This is what you have to do. This is how you unlock it. This is how you transfer data. Do you see? If you have to find out by yourself, it is such a big task. So a sincere seeker has always been intelligent enough to seek the company of the wise. And to seek the company of the wise, you need to develop humility. What is humility? To know that you don't know anything. Knowledge begins when you realize that you don't know anything. The moment you say, I know, that is the beginning of your problems in life. All problems we face in life are from the misunderstanding that I think I know. Isn't it? You are saying something, before you finish your sentence, the wife has completed it in her mind. You only said half of it, but she has already completed it in her mind, and she says, I know what you are. Most misunderstandings happen between husband and wife who live for 100, 80, 50, 30 years together, because they think that they know the other person. You don't know yourself, how do you know the other person? You don't know why your mind behaves in this particular way, why you keep jumping from this thing to that thing, why all this drama is happening in your own life, but you think that you know that person very well. So, the first eligibility for knowledge is to know that you do not know. When you say you do not know, then you become open to knowing. When you become open to knowing, then the knowledge comes into your life, and that is Upanishad. Upanishad means what? Upanishad is sitting close. Upa means close, Nishad means sitting. Upanishad means sitting close to knowledge with a desire to understand knowledge. Look how most of our conversations, we go to a party or a get together, have you noticed the conversations? Nobody wants to listen, everybody is waiting to talk. Somebody is talking, you are not listening, you are just waiting for your turn to talk. So, there is nobody eager to listen. That is not Upanishad. Upanishad is when you sit with an intention to listen and you keep your mouth shut. That is Upanishad. That is when you are able to perceive knowledge. Otherwise, you are always trying to say, I know, I know, I know, I know. So, when you are able to empty yourself, then the divine fills you. So, this is important to know. What? Creation is represented by Brahma, contentment and destination is Shiva, and the path belongs to Vishnu, the skillful path of yoga, which is living in the world at the same time not being too much attached to the world. So, the whole Gita is about this. The whole Gita, Krishna says all the practical options, all the time also keeps saying that, you know, action you can do, this you can do, that you can do, but what is best is knowledge. Get established in knowledge and do action. Do not run away from anything, do everything, but know that your destination is this and only knowledge can take you there, and only through knowledge you will come to. And then he keeps on giving the steps to knowledge. Okay. So, there are three aspects. The whole essence of the Upanishads and the essence of Bhagavad Gita is also the same, is that existence has three main aspects of it. Say for example, in this room, what all can you see? What all is there in this room? What is there in this room? Walls, okay. Ceiling, floor,
the air,
okay. Now, what is there? I did not say what you can see. You may be able to see, you may not be able to see also. What is there? You are all there, you are not here. You are here, furniture. Me are there, the furniture is there. All hanging is there. What else is there? Curtain.
Watch. Calendar. Watch.
Yeah. There is this huge space as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Space.
Yeah. Most of us miss the space. The most obvious thing is the space, and we are all in that space. Yes? So, the unchanging aspect of this universe is the space. This space is called Brahman. And this is not an empty dead space. This space is scintillating with energy, with knowledge, with everything is there in this space. And the things with a name and form, the curtain, the wall hanging, the wall, the me, the you, the furniture, this is called Prakriti. Anything with a name and form is called Prakriti. Anything in nature, what you call around, is Prakriti. Now, Prakriti is a very small part of the existence. Ignorance, when you think that is the only part of existence. When you give more importance to the Prakriti than to the Brahman, that is the beginning of ignorance, because you get attached to what you think is real. Have you seen all your problems are with name and forms? You do not have problem with space. Do you see? What you are attached to is the small part of existence, and that is the source of your conflicts in life. And what is the source of release for you? What is the source of energy for you is the space. There is no conflict there. So, suppose now you all dissolve into this space. Okay? imagine we are all here, all the furniture, all hangings, all the furniture, everything dissolves, then what remains? Space. But you are still here as an unmanifested presence. You are just dissolved, but you are here. Are you getting it? To be really aware to understand this. This is very important. So, this space which has not manifested itself into anything is Brahman, and the same part of this Brahman which has manifested itself is Prakriti, and there is a part which has not manifested but wants to manifest. There is a part of the space which has not yet manifested, wants to manifest, that is called Purusha. So, Purusha is a part of the Brahman which wants to manifest. When the Purusha manifests, it becomes Prakriti. So, Prakriti is controlled by Purusha, because it is the desire of the Prakriti that is manifested as you, me, the furniture. Ultimately, everything is made up of atoms, right? Everything is made up of atoms, and the atoms in the space, in the furniture, in my body, in the phone, they are all same. It is just that different set of atoms are arranged in a different pattern to produce a different name and form. Are you getting what I am saying? Yeah. Say for example, there is this space. Okay, in this space there is this Purusha which thinks, okay, let me express myself as an apple. So an apple is created, an apple forms, because it is so much full of sattva, the intention manifests. Now after a while, what happens? It says, let me become a table. So there is an apple and there is a table as well, and then there is people. So they all come from the intentions of the Purusha. After some time, the atoms in the apple feel, I am bored of being an apple, now I want to become something else. So the apple starts to dissolve, the apple starts to die and disintegrate, and then at the same time another human being is being born. So what happens? A small part of the atom goes and becomes a human being, because it says, okay, let me be a human being this time, and a small part of it becomes a furniture, a small part of it becomes a wall. So the atoms of the apple will disappear and become a part of everything else. In the same way, when the human body disappears, it becomes something else. So the whole thing is just a play and display of consciousness. It appears, it manifests, it goes. It appears, manifests, it goes, but the presence stays. So if you understand this, you will realize that I am not just this body, I am much bigger than this. All my conflicts and problems are being limited to holding on to my body as my only identity, my body and my mind. But there is something bigger than this, which is the Purusha. What is Purusha? Purusha is the source of everything, and Purusha stays as a witness. Okay. Right now you are listening to me. Okay. Who is listening? Become aware of that something in you which is listening. Are you aware? That is Purusha. Okay. Let us do one thing. Let us do this. Just move your hands up and down. Okay. Okay. You have done that. What was your focus on? Moving your hand up and down. Okay. Now we will do the same thing in a different way. Now you are moving your hand. You are moving your hand slowly, but you are aware of all the movements. You become aware that your finger is now coming off the floor. It is moved this much. It is moved this much. Okay. Now we will do the same movement. You are fully aware of your movements, what you are doing. Okay. You are aware that the hands are moving and they are coming wherever they have to come, they are touching, and now they are coming back, coming back, coming back, coming back. Now where was the focus?
Action.
On the observer of the movement. Do you see? When you first you moved, you just did this. Now when you become very aware, when you move in awareness, the focus is not on the action, the focus is on the observer of the action. Did you get it? That is Purusha. The one who observes, the one who witnesses. So when you are able to withdraw from the scenery to the seer, then you are established in the Purusha. And once you establish in the Purushi, that is all you can do by your effort. Your effort is only to withdraw from the scenery and to establish in the seer. Once you do this, you automatically dissolve into the Brahman. That process is called meditation. Meditation is what? You withdraw from the world, establish in the self, in your witness. When you establish in your witness, after a little while, what happens? The witness also dissolves and you become part of the Brahman. Moving from the form to the formless is meditation. So, Prakriti. So, Prakriti is what we are most attached to. So, we need to understand Prakriti much better. So, what is Prakriti? Prakriti is made up of 5 elements. Yeah? These are earth, water, fire, air and space. Okay? So, everything that has a name and form is made up of 5 elements. And each element is sustained by what? What sustains your life? Prana. Energy is what sustains your life. At a deeper aspect, you are just energy, you are pure energy. The form is only an illusion. So, every element is given a unit of prana, depending upon how dynamic it is. In the scientific world, there is a living and a non-living thing. Yeah? In the spiritual world, everything is living. There is no non-living thing. The degree of aliveness varies. Some part of creation is less dynamic, some is more dynamic, but everything is living. That is why, you know, we do Ayuth Puja. We worship every part of existence, even a stone, a scissor and everything. We don't consider it as dead. So, a stone has got very little dynamic energy. That is why it is called Jada. And on the other end, human beings have got the most dynamic energy. If you leave a stone, it can stay in that place for millions of years. A human being can't stay in a position for 2 minutes. So, there is dynamism. The prana wants to move, and that which is very dynamic is called Chaitanya. So, one end is Jada, other end is Chaitanya. So, when you are full of life, you are called Chaitanya. That is why God is called Chaitanya, because it is full of dynamism. Children are called Chaitanya because they are full of dynamism, positive dynamism. So, the earth element has got 1 unit of prana. Okay. Water element is more dynamic than the earth. So, water can move a bit. So, water has got 2 units of prana. Fire is even more dynamic. So, it has got 3 units. Fire can spread easily. Water can go in only one direction, but fire can spread in many directions. Fire has 3 units of prana. Air has 4 units of prana. It is even more dynamic. And space has 5 units of prana. So, we are a combination of all these. At the same time, they represents different states of your mind. Earth represents stability. The earth element brings stability, but when the earth element is out of sync, it represents lethargy, dullness, heaviness. The water element represents energy, Shakti, and when the water element is out of sync, it represents craving. Whenever there is craving in your life, know that the water element is dominant. Why we suffer from lot of craving in life? Because 60% of our body is water. Craving is the biggest distraction for us in life. When the fire element is out of sync, it represents as obsession, greed. When the air element is out of sync, it represents as restlessness. When it is in sync, it is playfulness. When the air element is not in sync, it becomes restlessness. And the space element can never be out of sync. You use the space element to bring all these other elements into synchrony. And that aspect is called meditation again. Yoga is connecting to the space element to sync these other elements together. So, When you are connected to the space element, what do you feel? You feel joy, you feel contentment. That is why Shiva is called space. You see? So, space and Shiva are representative, space element. So, to feel contentment, to feel joy, all you need is at a minimum of 5 units of prana. Plants have got 6 units of prana because they are a combination of the elements. Animals have 7 units of prana. They are a bit more dynamic and expressive than plants. And human beings are bestowed with 8 units of prana. So, when you are born, you are given 8 units of prana with which you are born with. And if you hold on to it, you will be like a baby, blessed. Have you seen a baby? Baby has got no craving, no aversion, no greed, no status, no name also. But it is happy. Why? Because it is holding on to the prana which nature has given. As you grow older, what do? You start developing tendencies wherein you start losing prana. Where do you lose prana? Our senses. The main place where we lose prana are the senses. Every pleasure tires you. Have you seen this? Every pleasure gives you a little bit of joy and gives you more tiredness. What do you like to eat? Jahangir, jalebi, gulab jamun, whatever. Yeah. See, recently, couple of weeks ago, I was in India. There was a home warming ceremony, and then they put a jahangir in the plate. I hadn't eaten a jahangir for a long time. So I ate. It was really nice. It was top quality one, and I had a bite and said, "Wow, this is so nice." In India, the code of love is food. If somebody loves you, means they should feed you like anything. That's only then they are happy, isn't it? So before I could finish my sentence, I had 4 jahangirs in my plate. And the first bite, which actually I thought I experienced heaven, by the time I ate the 4th jahangir, I just wanted to finish it off. This is what the sensory pleasure does. It gives you a hope of joy, an assurance of joy, but tires you at the end. Every sensory pleasure tires you. Whether it is food or sex or smell or taste, everything is the same. It gives you a little bit of joy, but drains your energy. As your energy starts draining, what happens? Your perception of the world comes down. Your ability to enjoy the world as it is comes down. Then you start putting conditions. If this is there, I will be happy. If he is there, I will be happy. If this happens this way, then I will be happy. Then you start losing all your centeredness. The happiness drains away. And even when you go by the units of prana, if we can accumulate 5 units of prana, that is good enough for you to be happy. Nature has given you 3 reserve units, just in case. But we always end up in 1 or 2 units of prana only. Imagine when the alarm goes off in the morning, you got half a unit of prana. You just don't want to get up. Do you see? That is why the spiritual practices are important, because they bring up your prana. When you bring up your prana, what happens? The energy is higher, you perceive better. Have you noticed when you are very energetic, even if somebody makes a comment which is not so nice, you are able to brush it off. You say, it's okay. But when you are very tired or very irritated, somebody even makes a joke, you explode. Have you seen that? Isn't it? You are always making fun of me. What do you think of yourself? That was almost happened in the morning there. So when the prana is low, small things will upset you. You go to a restaurant and you order something. Yeah, you order something and he takes 5 extra minutes to deliver it. Suddenly you start boiling inside. What is happening? So we should be aware of all this. What is happening inside me? So when the energy is high, you are able to accept life. When the energy is low, you live in conflicts. This should be your awareness. Whenever you enter conflict, you should realize, oh, my energy has gone down. I need to do something. And have you noticed when you come back from work or when you had a long tiring day, You always go and eat something which is not healthy. There is a craving to go for something which is not good for you. Yes or no? Yeah? You see this? That is what, when the energy is low, the craving comes up. A craving is a sign of low prana again. The craving for all unhealthy things comes up. What you need to do at that time? Make sure there is nothing unhealthy in the house in the first place, so you can't eat it. That's what I do. When I go to work in the morning, I make sure there is nothing to eat. I won't even cook anything. There is nothing to eat at home. I feel I'm hungry and I say, oh, I have to cook. So I keep the cooker and then go and have a shower, do some pranayam. By the time I have done all my practices, food is ready. They go eat something healthy. But if there is some biscuit, some chocolate, some ice cream, some cake or some mixture, first time, so let me open it. And the moment you eat it, oh, I have eaten something. Let me do meditation later on. And that is the end of it. This is how the craving works. So, what is lacking is the awareness bit. The moment the awareness, oh, a craving is coming up in me, that is good enough. Even if you are attending to it, now my craving is coming up, I am being a slave of my craving, I am attending to it now. That awareness is good enough. Then you will feel so bad about yourself, then you will say, no, let me not do it. This is the way to overcome habits. All habits are cravings. Your tea, your coffee, all that is all just craving. There is no harm in eating or drinking anything. No, don't take it like that. It's not good or bad. If you feel like drinking tea, drink tea. If tea is not available, there is no tea. That's okay. But you should not be running in search of tea. Oh, I didn't have my tea, I am getting a headache. Where is my cup of tea? That is an addiction. A desire comes up to drink tea. If the Purusha wants to drink tea, go and drink tea. That's all. And finish it off. Then you are not sitting, oh, this is morning, I have to drink my tea now. I have to drink my second cup of coffee now. Where is my second cup? Oh, I am so busy today, I couldn't go and get my tea. I am feeling very shaky. So, this is addiction. This is a habit. This you have to break. This is bondage. A small cup of tea has become bigger than you in life. You saying, if it is there, I will have it. If it is not there, it is okay. So what, I will have it tomorrow, I will have it later on, so what? That is freedom. Freedom is not doing nothing. Freedom is having a say whether you have to do something or not. Nothing can compel you to do. You do it if you want. If you don't, what you say, it is okay. Somebody respects you, it's fine. Somebody doesn't respect you, it's okay. You got food to eat, it's okay. God has given me a chance to feast. There is no food to eat, God has given me a chance to fast. That's it. That is life. If you have that attitude to say yes to life that way, nothing can shake you in life. Nothing. And this is the purpose of knowledge, is to make you unshakable. Unshakable in life. And if you don't achieve this, every other success is a failure. No? So somewhere in the deep, a few chapters down the line, Krishna says, what is winning the world? You first win over your mind. Anybody can win the world. Anybody can accumulate money. Anybody can accumulate status. Win over your cravings. That is the real victory. So human beings have 8 units of prana. So all of us have got this ability of 8, and with practice and guidance we can increase it to 16. We can double the amount of prana we can do. It is said that Buddha had 10 units of prana, Rama had 12, Hanuman had 14, and Krishna is the only one who had 16 units of prana. That is why Gita is so special, that he was so dynamic. Krishna, if you look at Krishna's life, there is no life which is as challenging as his life. If you say you have got problems in your life, just look at his life. Okay? Even before he was born, they were trying to kill him. At least nobody is trying to kill you. Isn't it? If somebody is trying to kill you, what else do you? All your everything is a waste. If you know that somebody is running behind you to kill you, then what is the point of working, accumulating money, doing this, doing that? You know, at any time it can go. From the beginning to the end, Krishna's life was under threat. Yeah? How many battles he fought, how many conflicts he had to resolve. And none of them were his, have you noticed? He did not gain anything from any of the wars he fought. He fought all the wars for somebody else, to help somebody else. That is the living by example. He did nothing for himself. Even though his survival was a threat, he did not care about it. He said, life begins, life ends when it has to done. What I am going to do, I will do what is needed at this point in time. That is wisdom. So, becoming aware of our prana is the most important thing, and attending to increasing our prana. How do we increase our prana? We do the 4 sources of energy. That is it. The whole happiness program is in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, we can find out as we go along. You attend to the 4 sources of energy. Eat the right food. Don't overeat. Don't eat tamasic food. Eat, see the same qualities. Brahma represents tamas, Shiva represents sattva, Vishnu represents rajas. Rajas is activity. Tamas is craving, delusion, wrong understanding, and sattva is contentment. And the whole skill in life is to give a direction to your rajas. If you don't give a direction to your rajas by seva, by sadhana, by exercise, by proper action, which again he describes in chapter 3, what is right action and all, the same rajas will go in your senses, it gets drained in your senses. He says the purpose of your knowledge is to give a direction to your rajas, and there you have to follow Krishna. Do what he says, then your rajas gets a direction, then your actions will bring fulfillment. He says, though no action brings fulfillment, the action I prescribe you do that will bring fulfillment. All action leads to more karma, more bondage. But the action which does not lead you to karma are the actions which are prescribed in the Gita. The 3 main types of actions are prescribed. They are called yajna, dana and tapa. These are the 3 main actions. What is yajna? Yajna is people coming together to raise the prana of the group. So, this is a yajna what is happening. When you come together and do your meditation, your kriya, your pujas, that is a yajna. When people come not to drain each other, but to uplift each other, that is a yajna. You know, when we go to a party, how we are. When we are going to a get together or a wedding or a party, very well dressed, we look as if we are the bride than the bridegroom. Huh? We are so well dressed, looking good looking. And when we come back from the party, how are we? Do you see? And see the opposite. You have a very tired, busy day, you are tired, you come and do your kriya, do your meditation, and how are you at the end of the session? You are so uplifted. So, that which uplifts you is a yajna. So, he says, get engaged in actions that uplift you and the people around you, not in those that will drain you and people around you. That is a waste of a life, he says. Those who don't commit their life to yajna are wasting their life. So, yajna. So, 3 types of yajna he says. He says dhyana yajna, jnana yajna and dravya yajna. Dhyana yajna is meditating together. He says that is the highest form of yajna. The highest practice is what? Meditate together. Get dissolved into this space. That is what is energizing you. Where do you get all the energy you think? It is from the space. What happens, do you think, when you sleep at night? Do you notice what happens when you go to sleep? You first withdraw from the world. Yeah? All your senses you withdraw. And then there is a little bit of awareness that I am. Then you get into the Purusha, and then the Purusha dissolves and you touch the Brahman. So, nature has built in a mechanism in you to go back and rest in the Brahman every night. That is why when you wake up, you are energized, because Brahman has charged you up. And then you wake up, you identify with the world and start opening all the holes, and all the energy starts pouring out. Again you feel tired and shattered and go to sleep. Nature says, come on, sleep now, otherwise it will be a trouble to you and everybody else. And then you wake up. Isn't it? All we have to do is stop you from sleeping one night, and you see how much of a trouble you will be for everybody. So, nature, out of compassion to everybody around you, makes sure you sleep every night. And that is what you do when you meditate as well. What you do, you touch that Brahman and then you energize. To sleep, nature has to tire you. To meditate, you can do it yourself. So that's why it is a greatest blessing to be able to meditate in life. The second one is Jnana Yajna. This is what we are doing, Jnana Yajna. You share knowledge. See, knowledge uplifts you. Knowledge makes you awake and alert. Have you seen, do you feel more awake and alive listening? Yes or no?
Yes.
Isn't it? Just listening to knowledge, you feel more alive. You feel the prana has come up. And then Dravya Yajna. Dravya Yajna is the usual rituals which you do, the homas, the pujas, and all those things are Dravya Yajna. They say only those who don't have access to the first two should go to that one. The most privileged will do meditation. The slightly less privileged will share knowledge. The least privileged will do rituals. And the worst privileged will not do anything. So do yajna. Then the second aspect is engage in dana. Dana is what? Dana is just being generous in life. If you really look into your life, God has given you a lot more than you actually need. And He has been doing this since you were born. Every time in life, you have always been given a lot more than what you actually need. When you realize this abundance in your life, you become generous. You don't hoard. You have 10 pairs of shoes, I want the 11th pair. Take the 11th pair, but give one pair to somebody else. So at least just have 10 pairs all the time. So a feeling of abundance only can bring out generosity in you. If you feel I've got nothing, I've not got enough, I've not got enough, you will die in that scarcity. Know that you have got so much. This opportunity to come and sit here and listen to something as beautiful as this is the biggest blessing, and that you should feel very privileged. You know what, so many people are around, only I could come and sit here, only a few of us can enjoy this, and you should feel I am blessed. What more do you want? And when you feel, then you should feel generous. I need to take this to others. I need to make sure others also get it. So next time when you come, bring one more person with you, so they will also get the benefit of this. That is dana. Dana is what? Desire to share the goodness in you with people around you. When you make some food, not eating by yourself, inviting somebody and say something nice, you also eat and feeling happy. And this was our tradition, to be frank, isn't it? In my village, my grandfather, he used to go in the afternoon looking for somebody to share the food. Until he comes in, he wouldn't eat food. They would always get somebody from somewhere, does not matter, to come and sit, and they would eat food in the afternoon. So in the Gita, Krishna says, one who cooks food for himself is not eating food, is eating sin. So this is all in our system, we have just let go of it. So that is dana. Dana is knowing that I have enough, I want to share it with others. The moment you become generous, God will just pour into your life prosperity. Prosperity will be poured into your life. The moment you think I don't have, the God says there is no point giving this to a person anything. Whatever I give, he tells he does not have. So let him work hard and get what he wants. Then the grace will not flow in your life. Grace flows when you open up to your life. So when grace flows, what happens? What you want in life will start coming to you automatically. But when you start hoarding, what happens? Then you have to work. You know, people say, I have worked so hard to come to this position. I have struggled. That's because you have not been generous in life. If you have been generous, God would have done your work and you would have just passed in life. You would have flown through life. So this is the second thing. Every time you think you are struggling to come to a position, know that you have been less generous in life. So being generous is another action which is important. So that is why service is a part of every tradition, isn't it? Charity and service are part of every tradition. In every tradition, people do something to look after the community. And then tapa. What is tapa? Tapa literally means frying. Tapa means heat. And life constantly keeps frying us, putting us in situations here and there. And when life fries you, accepting it as part of life is tapa. It is okay. Is tapas. People run marathon, people go to the gym, people exercise. All this is tapas. It is not joy, isn't it? Running 10 kilometers or 42 kilometers is not joy, but then you do it willingly. You go through that. So, ability to go through the unpleasantness of life, accepting that is a part of life, is tapas. So, what is the biggest tapas? Saying yes to life. Say yes to life, then you have done your tapas. Stop saying no. When you say yes to life, that is your tapas in life. Okay, this is what God wants me to go through now, I will go through. That's fine. And know that you will never be given a problem which you can't handle. The size and length of the tail of every animal is measured. A dog does not have an elephant's tail. So, the tail, God knows how much tail is. So, every animal has got a tail which it can easily wag. So, God knows how much trouble to give you, how much challenges to give you. So, know that every challenge is something which you can handle. It is only to bring the strength in you, not to put you down. Otherwise, life becomes very boring, isn't it? Most of our lives are stuck in routine. It is just a boring, mundane stuff. When is excitement? When you are missing the flight, or when something is happening at work. That is where all the excitement is. So, just to keep a bit of a juice in life, challenges are thrown at you. What is the difference between a problem and a challenge? Same thing. If you ask somebody to climb Mount Everest, you say, oh my God, what a big problem. For somebody who wants to do it, wow, that is a challenge, let me do it. A problem is something which you want to escape from. A challenge is something which you want to walk into. A problem is something which makes you feel small. A challenge is something which makes you feel you are bigger than it. Situation is the same. It's your energy and attitude. So, Arjuna now he is facing a problem according to him. Krishna says, no, it is a challenge. So, the first chapter is called Vishada Yoga. Vishada, the word Vishada comes from the word Visha, is a poisonous state of mind. He is in anguish. When do you feel distressed in life? You feel distressed in life when the life situation appears bigger than life itself. You have a situation in your life and you feel that is so big you can't handle it. Then life becomes a distress. Yeah? So, Arjuna is in this state. He says, what can I do? I can't handle this. What are you saying? You are making me do adharma. Look at there, my grandfather is there, my guru is there, my friends are there, people who shared their food, my classmates are there, and you are asking me to kill them. How can I do that? I can't do that. That is adharma. And then Arjuna is very intelligent. There are two types of people in the world who refuse to do things. One type of people are simple but arrogant people. They say, no, I don't want to do it. Children sometimes say, I don't want to eat that vegetable. Okay? But there are this smart type of people who give all nice reasons why they should not be doing it. It's very difficult to argue with them because they are very logically correct. At least these other people you can just hit on their head and say, come on, eat it. It is good for you, they will listen. Or you give them one good reason, they will say, oh, maybe you are right, they will do it. But these people are too smart. And we find these smart people everywhere in the world, where they find real excuse why they should not be doing good things, why they should not be doing these things. All the debates you see, all these pseudo intellectuals who come on television, they are all these people. And Arjuna is some intellectual, he is very smart, he is now giving explanation to Krishna why he should not be doing what Krishna is telling. He says, you are pushing me towards adharma. When adharma rules the world, when you are making me do adharma, when I do adharma, what happens? Varna Sankara happens. I will explain what Varna Sankara is. He says, Varna Sankara happens. Because this is very interesting. I also didn't know this, I only got to know it recently. Varna Sankara is when the classes don't perform their function. Say for example, in a family, somebody earns, somebody cooks, somebody enjoys, somebody works, do something else. So, each person has got their role, and if we expect somebody whose role is not to earn money, somebody whose role is to boss, to be a subservient, then that harmony of that family is lost. Yeah. So, lot of problems in families in modern times is because people have not identified their roles and not sticking to them. Everybody wants to be everybody else. So, Varna Sankara is there is a class system in the society, so that everybody contributes in their own way, so that there is harmony in the system. And one of the systems was that a woman should always marry somebody who is higher than her in intelligence, finance and strength. Then what happens? The child which is born will be of a much higher quality. So, this is the prescription in the ancient world. The tradition is this is how it is. Woman should never marry somebody who is lower than her. When that happens, the children will be of a lower quality, because what determines, according to Shastras, the offspring is the quality of the seed. Even though the soil is fertile, the seed has to be of good quality. So, always the soil has to seek a higher seed. So, when adharma happens, Varna Sankara is when this system is lost. He says when adharma rules the world, the first thing that happens is women lose their principles. When women lose the principles, the children which are born are not of good quality, and when they are not of good quality, they bring bad name to the parents as well as the ancestors as well as the dynasty. So, the whole investment in the dynasty by our Chandravamsha kings will be gone. So, this is the explanation Arjuna is giving to Krishna. Because of you, my whole dynasty will go, because you are asking me to do adharma. So, then Krishna starts talking about why it is not adharma, what is dharma, what is action, how to escape from this, what is the right aspect of doing things. All this he will start explaining from the chapter 2. So, chapter 2 is quite a big chapter. In fact, chapter 2 is the major chapter. In chapter 2 he summarizes the whole Gita, and in the subsequent chapters it picks a small part of it and explains it more. In chapter 2 he gives all the options to Arjuna and says why his understanding is wrong, what is right understanding, what are the options in life to overcome challenges, which one should you take, which is best, and how to go about it. What is karma? All these things he will say in the chapter 2. Okay, that we will see next time. Okay, Jai Gurudev.